You know, Rebels, if you've been checking out some of my promotional ads on social media, you will be aware that I have been using a lot of AI programs to help me create ads. But you know what? There's a lot more uses for AI than just funny little videos. And I'd like to introduce one of our new sponsors, Podium. It is a leader in creating AI tools for podcasters. Now, let's say you've got a podcast, or maybe you're even thinking of doing a podcast. You're probably wondering, well, how can AI be integrated with your workflow? I'll tell you about Podium. As a podcaster, you know that writing show notes and creating chapters and transcribing episodes takes a lot of time, and it can cost you a lot of money too. But you know what? That's where Podium comes in. It's an AI tool designed specifically for creators and podcasters with the goal of making post-production tasks quick and easy. And in just a few minutes, Podium generates show notes, chapters, summaries, clips for social media, a full transcript, suggested episode titles, social media posts, and more. Whew, that's a lot of work for one little program. Your show notes are key to your podcast's success because it helps new listeners find your podcast and they'll know if it's a fit for them. You know, kind of like Too Many Podcasts. It also improves your SEO, that's your search engine optimization. Ooh, big phrase there. And overall accessibility. And with Podium, you can focus on creating a great podcast and let Podium's AI do the heavy lifting. But Podium isn't just for solo creators and podcasters. It's a game changer for editors, producers, marketers, agencies, and production studios. Teams that use Podiums are able to increase workloads, decrease turnaround times, and improve their quality. How does it work? Very easy. First, go to Podium's website, and you'll see that link that's right there in the show notes. You get 3 hours free just to try it. Pretty cool, huh? And using that link also supports this show as well. And you know what else happens? Because I'm a good guy. You use my link, you will get 50% off for your first month. So visit the site, upload an MP3 file, and download your files. And that's it. And if you need anything else, you can use Podium GPT to generate articles and any marketing copy you might need in seconds. Instant show notes, transcripts, chapters for your podcast or channel. This will level up that podcast. So check out Podium today.
The Sherpa Screening Room is a presentation of the Sherpa's podcast picks. This show is brought to you in cooperation with the SJ Network. If you are interested in appearing on podcasts like this one, or better ones than this, contact Stephen Joyner at s-j-network.com. We now bring you to the Sherpa Chalet, where Jim the podcast Sherpa has finally unlocked himself from the bathroom.
We begin Season 13 with a Sherpa Screening Room interview with Ashley Griffin, who is an actress, director, and playwright. She has directed and starred in many major theatrical productions, including Hamlet. I told my friend I was appearing in Hamlet at the Globe Theatre. He said, "Are you being facetious?" I said, "No, Polonius."
Coming to you from Sherpa Chalet in beautiful downtown Mount Podcastia, it's time for entertainment interviews in the Sherpa Screening Room. Grab an aisle seat and a bucket of popcorn, but don't crunch too loud or you'll miss the show. Now, here's your host, Jim, the podcast Sherpa.
Hello there, Rebels of the Sherpa-lu. It's Season 13 of what used to be called Too Many Podcasts, but now it's called the Sherpa's Podcast Picks, and this is the Sherpa Screening Room. And I don't talk to podcasters on this show, but I talk to all sorts of creators like actors, directors, writers, singers, authors, musicians, and just interesting people, you name it. They show up here in the Sherpa Screening Room. And who am I? Oh, I'm Jim the Podcast Sherpa. Hello. And this week, this is a unique kind of interview for me because I never really get the chance to speak to actors who are predominantly stage actors. And this lady that we will be speaking with today is well known in the theater industry. And she's done a lot of creating with her directing and writing and acting in a lot of iconic roles. Her name is Ashley Griffin. She comes from Los Angeles, where she just happened to be where I was talking to her, and we got to know a little bit about her life and about her career in acting. Really fascinating stuff, and super talented lady. The stuff that she's done is really, truly amazing. But have a listen to my conversation with the wonderful and talented Ashley Griffin. Hello there, rebels of the Sherpa-lution, and welcome to the Sherpa Screening Room. My guest today is coming to us from a faraway place called LA. She is an actress of stage and screen and currently involved in a few stage projects herself. You may know her from appearances in movies such as The Greatest Showman or TV shows as Homeland, The Deuce, or Alias. And she's done a whole bunch of stuff on Broadway, in LA, in London, any place where there's a coast and a theater. She has been there. Ashley Griffin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, when did all of this start? When was your first experience getting involved with acting?
I mean, honestly, I was kind of born knowing that this is what I wanted to do.
Okay.
I mean, really, my only rule growing up was that I wasn't allowed to perform shows in the living room before 7:00 in the morning. And that's all I would do. And so finally, my mom put me in a little kids acting program because she's like, I need a break. And I was like, I found my people. So I grew up in Los Angeles. I was very fortunate. And so I started as a child actor in LA. I was in my first play when I was 5. But the blessing that I had was I actually got legitimate, serious acting training. So I did Shakespeare starting at age 8, and I did a lot of theater. So when I started to do film and television, I came to it as a trained child actor, as opposed to a kid who just sort of enjoyed this and was just sort of being myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of known as the kid who was like the serious actor, as opposed to the kid who got cast in commercials.
Okay.
And I always knew this is what I wanted to do. And I've been doing it ever since. And I've been performing and writing and, so I'm sort of known as the theatrical Hermione Granger, and this will show off my nerdiness. But when I was little, my mom got me a DVD of the great Broadway performances on the Ed Sullivan Show. And I fell in love with Anthony Newley, which for those of you who don't know his name, you probably best know him as the person who wrote the music for Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, or
That's
Charlie
right.
and the Chocolate Factory. But he was the first person in history to be nominated for Tonys for Best Book of a Musical, Best Score, and Best Actor for the same show in the same year. So starting from like age 6, my life goal was to be the first female Anthony Newley. So that sort of sums me up.
But you don't sing like him. Like, what kind of fool am I?
That's true. I sound very different.
I sound a lot worse. You also did some directing on the stage as well, right?
Yeah, I've definitely directed as well. I'm actually going to be directing a project at Theater for the New City in New York in a week or so. And it sounds like I made this up, but I'm probably most well known as being the first person in history to be nominated for a major award for both playing and directing Hamlet for a theatrical production. I did both for the same production. So yeah, I direct as well.
What part did you play in Hamlet?
Hamlet.
You were Hamlet. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So for playing and directing Hamlet for a theatrical production.
That's got to be a real challenge, because I mean, they always say that as an actor, Hamlet is the top of the peak as far as getting your acting chops and everything. And then you have to direct all of this too, and coordinate with everybody else around. How do you manage to do something like that?
Well, it's a little bit of a long story how that came about. Very long and epic story short. I had just played Rosalind in a production of As You Like It for this wonderful theater company. And I had this idea for a production of Hamlet for a while that was sort of a combination of a lot of personal experiences and then a lot of things in the zeitgeist. We actually ended up partnering with Emma Watson's He for She campaign and some really cool things with the project. But I've always related to Hamlet more than any other Shakespeare character. And in school, I've been very fortunate to go to some wonderful acting institutions, but in school was sort of consistently told that I could never, ever work on Hamlet's material because, quote, I was a girl, so I'd never play it. So what was the point? And I came up with this kind of interesting idea of the idea being Hamlet was a woman who'd been raised as a man for succession purposes.
Okay.
And Ophelia was a man who'd been bullied his whole life for being too sensitive. And I went back and reread the play with that in mind, and it actually worked beautifully. And so I went to the same theater company I was doing As You Like It with, and I pitched it to them with the idea that I would play Hamlet and we get somebody else to direct it. And they came back to me and they knew of my work as a writer and a director. And they said, we'll do it on the condition that you play Hamlet and direct it. And I was like, hold up. I don't know if that's a great idea. And they're like, hear us out. They're like, you have a really strong concept and we think it would be more trouble than it's worth to have to go through the middleman of you communicating that to someone and then them trying to execute it. And so I went away and I thought about it, and I'm very fortunate to have the wonderful mentor and friend Gabriel Barry, who is an incredible Broadway director. I always say, if there's anything you like about my direction, you can credit it to him. And if there's anything you didn't like, it lands squarely on my shoulders. But at the time, he was doing a production of Cyrano de Bergerac where he was playing Cyrano. He's also a Tony-nominated actor. He's incredible. He was playing Cyrano and he was directing it. So I got to shadow him, and I did a lot of research, and I basically came back to the company and I said, I'll do it if you get me a really great stand-in. And we did, and it was so successful that it came back for a second year, and I'm in talks to bring it back again. So it was a lot, and it was really intense, but it was a really incredible experience that worked out very, very well. I wouldn't recommend it to everyone, and it was a very unique circumstance, but
and not a first role type of thing.
Right. Yeah.
I guess it's interesting because, people that know Hamlet, not personally, but that know the play, he's a conflicted person constantly. And you're just presenting a different thing for him to be conflicted about.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it mirrors the things that Hamlet's already conflicted about. And what it also did is it took moments in the show that, let's be blunt, can be very misogynistic, such as, the famous lines, frailty, thy name is woman, and things like that. And suddenly, like, frailty, thy name is woman suddenly became self-directed. And every time that Ophelia is referred to as you speak like a green girl or whatnot, it became this bullying jab of sort of quote unquote man up. And so it kind of smoothed some of those things over. And I mean, Hamlet is already conflicted about so many things that it just became this physical manifestation of some of that conflict.
You were doing commercials when you were a kid.
Well, I was the kid who couldn't get cast in a commercial to save my life because I wasn't that like cute kid that would. I did do a Disneyland commercial that was my pride and joy, and that was delightful. But literally, I can't believe I'm about to say this publicly. I literally was 7, and I was a little mini Hermione Granger in my part in the commercial. We all ad-libbed what we said. Is I was at Disneyland and I just looked very serious and went, all the kids love Disneyland. It's totally cool. So, I mean, that was me doing a commercial. So no, the stuff that I mainly did was really serious acting roles. I couldn't really get cast in a commercial to save my life.
What was your first role on television?
Oh my goodness. I don't even remember what my first role on television was. It's kind of all a jumble. It's just, I did a ton of things between the ages of 5 and when I went to college, including some tours of shows, some international things and whatnot. I do have a big claim to fame that I was the original choice for Claudia in Interview with the Vampire. That's a whole long story. But yeah, a whole smorgasbord of things that I don't remember what the exact first thing was, to be honest.
That's all right. Well, I was going to say, if so much came in, in the course of your life in that period of time, I could understand, having a chronology. It's not necessarily the most necessary thing, just as long as you have the experience, right? What is your best advice for folks that want to get involved in acting?
I mean, I guess it depends on your age, if you're asking sort of for advice for children actors or just actors in general.
Okay, you can take it from both if you want.
Sure. Well, for child actors, the big thing is it has to be driven by the child. There are so many kids in the industry that are being pushed into it by their parents. I'm very fortunate. I had the opposite of a stage mom. So my mom is unbelievable and so incredibly supportive, but I was the one dragging her to auditions. So it's got to be led by the child. And I think that there's a lot of great things about doing it as a kid. You get used to rejection really quickly. It's a great responsibility learner. If you have an audition, you have to memorize your lines and you have to give up doing other things. So there's really great things about it, but it's got to be child-led and it's got to be focused on from the aspect of a craft and a responsibility that we take seriously. And you've got to look out for the kid and protect them. Because I'm fortunate that I had great experiences, but that's also because I had a really great mom looking out for me that wouldn't let me in certain situations. If it's a situation where that's being led by the parents or the adults, like just don't do it whatsoever. But if you want to get into it and you're an adult, there's that old adage, if there's anything else you want to do, go do that. And there's some truth to that, but I would say get into it for the quote unquote right reasons. Don't do it because you want to be famous. Don't do it because you want to be a celebrity. Don't do it because you just think it's cool. Do it because there's a need inside of you to tell stories. And I also find that the happiest people in this industry, and a lot of times the most successful, are the ones that go into it not from the point of view of I want attention or I want to do X, Y, and Z, but from the point of view of I want to give the audience a gift. And I think that that's also the best mentality. And then really train and really hone your craft is what I would say.
Which was easier for you, being on stage and acting, or the movies and the television?
I liked both of them. They're both different animals. At the end of the day, my heart is really with the theater, and it really comes down to it's immediate. Everybody's in a room together. You're doing it in that moment. I also really enjoy getting to tell stories from beginning to end and doing that arc. The difference between them is, one analogy is sort of that theater is like running a marathon and doing film or TV is like doing a sprint. And there's great things to both of them. The fun thing with film is you can be as intimate about it as you want. You can try 5,000 things and then you sort of never have to do it again. So there's great things about both of them. But if a fairy godmother showed up and was going to wave a magic wand, at the end of the day, I would pick being in a Broadway piece over being in not to say that I don't love both of them very much.
Okay. Now, you said that you're currently working with some of your plays right now to get them on the other coasts.
Sort of. So I have two pieces that are sort of in immediate development. One is a play of mine called Trial so both of these pieces I'm going to talk about. I wrote them and I'm also in them. And Trial's the piece that if I never write another thing as long as I live, I'll be happy because I wrote this piece. And it went up off Broadway at ATA right before the pandemic and directed by the great Lori Petty, who most people probably know she played Kit in A League of Their Own and more recently from Orange is the New Black. And she's extraordinary. Some people say never meet your heroes, and I always say do if your hero is Lori Petty. And it was hugely successful. Lori and I won the Well Life Network Award for it, and I got a county commendation for its advocacy impact. And we were sort of on track to move, and then the pandemic happened. And I'm so fortunate now that I'm working with a wonderful, wonderful lead producer named Fred Rohan Vargas, who's worked on Company and Parade on Broadway and lots of other wonderful things. We just did a big industry presentation a few months ago with the most extraordinary cast. Kate Siegel, who people probably know from Fall of the House of Usher and Haunting of Hill House, and Callum Blue from The Tudors, and the wonderful Jenny Bareilles, and just a truly remarkable cast. And Lori is obviously attached to direct it. And it was so successful that we're now in the process of getting a new commercial production up in New York with the same company. And it's extraordinary. This group of people, I've never bonded so quickly with a group of people as we all did in the room, but very excited about that. And then I just closed a show off Broadway called The Opposite of Love that was also interesting in that it's a two-hander. So I got to do it with the truly wonderful, wonderful Broadway artist, Danny Gardner, which was really special because Danny and I have known each other and been friends for a really long time. And we've done development on a lot of things. And this is the first time we got to do a full piece together. And it was just the two of us. Mm-hmm. And I'm so proud of the work that we did. And the off-Broadway production was incredibly successful. We got unbelievable response. And now we're hoping for a transfer to LA and more details of a future life beyond that. So I'm really excited that it's gotten such attention and positive response, and that I got to do it with somebody like Danny.
What are the two plays about?
So Trial, the little log line is it takes place in an afterlife that's represented as a corporate office building, and the piece is a very complex exploration of forgiveness, which is a complicated thing. Mm-hmm. And it's about a girl who died when she was 15. She's been waiting for an extraordinary amount of time for her paperwork to go through so she can move on. And she's told one day by somebody from upper management that the man who was indirectly responsible for her death has just died, and the state of his soul is in question, and she has to serve as judge and jury. And the rest of the play is sort of this afterlife court case playing out where the evidence is reliving scenes from their life, from their lives. And there's a twist at the end, and the whole thing is a very complicated exploration of forgiveness. And the opposite of love is sort of a look at some of the issues that exist in our current culture when it comes to love and intimacy, and the fact that love and intimacy have become very much, I think, in some ways, commodities and transactional. So it's a two-hander, and it's about a young woman named Eloise who has been the longtime victim of sexual assault, with the one line not crossed being actual intercourse, and feeling that she, in her own words, quote unquote, needs to get over herself and join the real world. She's been sort of waiting for the right person that she's in love with to experience that with. And she feels like, nah, got to get over myself. She hires a down on his luck hustler named Will to take her virginity. And their first encounter does not go well, but she is a trust fund baby, and he quickly realizes that she's a potential cash cow. And so he says, well, why don't I just come back every week and we can just talk? And this piece has been described as if Pretty Woman was a Black Mirror episode sans tech. So there was one review that said, wherever you think the play is going, you're wrong. So
is it pretty safe to say that you're more drawn to dramas than other genres, or you're pretty flexible?
Not necessarily. I mean, what I think is hilarious is, for a long time, the thing I was most well known for is I'm the girl that wrote the Twilight parody musical that played at New World Stages and Perez Hilton was tweeting about, which is very much a parody and a comedy. So I would say that if you look at the majority of my work, it tends toward the dramatic, dealing with sort of deep, very human themes. But I definitely have some good comedies in my rep there. And I've written for film and television as well. So
was there anything that people might be familiar with?
The things I've written have either been things that I've ghost written for Broadway and film that I legally can't talk about.
Oh, okay.
Or things that are maybe a little smaller, but we are hoping that some of my theater projects also are going to get adapted. So.
Okay. One of my favorite questions to ask actors, I know you said that, you have to play Hamlet, and that's probably one of your dreams. Do you have any other dream roles that you would like to play, whether on stage or film or television?
Yeah, sure. So the thing that I love the most is getting to originate roles. There's something very, very special about that.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of pre-existing things, I'm very fortunate that I've gotten to work on Wicked, but Elphaba is like just fantasy role. I love her so much. And then the one character that I really haven't ever gotten to do anything with is Joan of Arc. I'd really love to do something with Joan of Arc. And also the original Little Mermaid story, like the original Hans Christian Andersen, is my favorite story ever. And I actually am in development with a musical that is inspired by that. But I do really love that original story. Always loved playing that sandbox. So
I like that. That's definitely an interesting list of choices.
Well, they sound like very divergent characters, but I tend to gravitate toward, if you're talking sort of in mythic terms, I gravitate toward crusaders, people that sort of feel out of place and get sent on some sort of task that is somewhat spiritual in nature and is going to require some big sacrifice. So like Joan of Arc, go read the original Little Mermaid. There are similarities, and like I relate very much to Frodo in Lord of the Rings. So there is definitely a mythic through line with the characters I tend to relate to, even though they seem to be divergent. And most of them end up dead too. So I'm very good at crying and dying. It's delightful.
Yeah, but I think if you like Shakespeare, though, that has to be mandatory, right? Crying and dying.
Yeah. Well, but what's interesting, and one of the reasons that I really got to be in my bonnet about Hamlet is when I was playing Rosalind, a lot of people say that Rosalind is the quote female Hamlet. And to some degree, I understand where that comes from. She's very verbose and very intelligent, and she talks a lot. But the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, there is no female Hamlet because there's no female protagonist of a Shakespearean tragedy. You could argue Lady M, but she's not really the center of that story. She's close to the center. Mm-hmm. And I love Shakespeare's tragedies and some of his more complex romances. Like I love Imogen and Cymbeline. I love Hamlet. And I was like, I want to explore Hamlet and the tragedy side. And technically I can't if we're going by traditional casting. So that's one of the reasons. But then what was interesting is just as there's technically no female Hamlet, there's no male Ophelia. And I had a very good male friend who said that the Shakespeare character that they related to the most was Ophelia. And I was like, well, wait a second. It's not fair that women can't sort of play in the Hamlet sandbox, but it's also not fair that men can't play in the Ophelia sandbox. I believe very much in gender equality, and I think that goes both ways.
Sure.
And so it was just as it was great for me to dive into Hamlet, it was really great for him to dive into Ophelia. And we had a couple other gender reverse castings. Horatio was the only woman in the military, and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern were the quote unquote queen bees of Wittenberg. And then every other character was cast gender traditional. So several cast members got to sort of play in that different sandbox, and it kind of revealed some really interesting things.
Yeah, and I guess as someone who's written plays, I guess as long as the writing is there, the gender can sometimes be flexible, even like in a
totally. I mean, it depends on the story. Like, but with anything that you're talking about, like for example, the color purple should not be. The musical The Color Purple should not be performed by non-Black performers because the story is about the Black experience. Sure. So if you're dealing with a story that like is about the male or female or non-binary or whatever it is experience, then maybe stay in that, arena. But if it's not about that specifically, there's kind of no reason why you can't switch it up with anything, with gender, with race, with age, with whatever it is. And I think that when you're doing it for the right reasons and not just to sort of put a quote unquote concept on top of something, it can be great. I mean, there's the infamous example in film of Sigourney Weaver in Alien, and that role was not written for a woman. It was written for a man. Right. And they really liked her. And they're like, well, it doesn't really change anything. And it made the movie really special and extraordinary because they found a really great performer. And that was what was important about it.
Yes, definitely. So where can people go if they want to find out a little bit more about what's going on with your career and some of your new projects?
Yeah. Well, my website is ashleygriffinofficial.com, ASHLEYGRIFFIN. And all the information about my projects and updates and everything, including I have 2 best-selling novels out as well. That was a fun activity during the pandemic. So you can keep up with me there. And then I'm on all social media on Instagram and TikTok. I'm at Ashley Griffin Official. I guess I'm technically on Twitter or X as Ashley J. Griffin. I'm really never really on there. I'm on Instagram and TikTok more and a little bit Facebook. But also the links to all those are on my website, and I have a YouTube channel as well. So all that's linked to on my website. And yeah, come follow me and come write me a message and tell me what you're up to too. But yeah, all my.
This is definitely one lady who knows how to keep busy. I'm glad you got to spend a little bit of time with me here in the Sherpa Screening Room, Ashley Griffin.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
A very special thank you to Ashley Griffin for swinging by the Sherpa Screening Room today. Make sure you check out some of her work. And you know what? Go to her website, ashleygriffin.com, and there's a section there with her doing acting segments and singing some songs. And she's got that classic voice that you like to hear on the Broadway stage. Just amazing. You'll really, really enjoy it. And thank you for listening. And we are here every Wednesday with hopefully new episodes, usually new episodes. I know we've got a bunch of Sherpa Screening episodes coming up and episodes of the Sherpa's podcast picks coming to you as well. It's a new season, so we've got to make it exciting. And hopefully there will be some new things coming up that I sincerely hope that you will enjoy. So, Lord Mr. Bruce, I believe it is time to head on out of here, and we will see you on Saturday for Sherpa Selects, and we'll be back next week with another episode. And until then, I say to you, Viva la Sherpa-lution!
Thanks for listening to the Sherpa Screening Room. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast. I'm Mr. Bruce, and this has been a Sherpa-lu Studios production. Viva la Sherpa-lution!